Welcome to this episode of Higher Dimensions. My name is Aaron Tomlinson. I want to thank you for joining me for this short episode. And in this episode, I want to talk about faith. I want to clear up some misunderstanding about faith, especially for people from a Christian background. And I want to talk about how actually the scriptures tell us some things about how faith works if we get a proper understanding and a proper translation. I want to use for my text from the Bible, Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 and verse 3. Let's start in verse 1. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. In your newer translations, for example, the New International Version says it like this: faith is the confidence of things that we hope for and the evidence of things that we do not see. Now, if you go back to some of the older translations, like, for example, the King James Version or the New King James Version, it's going to read very differently. In those versions, it says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of what we do not see. Now, there's a pretty big difference in our language between substance and confidence, or between confidence and substance. And I'll talk about what that is in just a minute. But let's look at how it affects our understanding. Hope obviously is something that's in the future. You don't hope for something that you already have. If you have it, you're not hoping for it. So hope has to do with something that's in the future. And the Greek word for hope in the scriptures there talks about a confident expectation that something is going to happen in your life. It means you're already confident, you're already assured that something is going to happen. That is hope. And so the translation that that faith is the confidence of things that we hope for is a little bit misleading. It leads you to think that if you can believe something is going to happen, something is going to show up, if you can be confident and fully persuaded in your mind and heart that God, let's say, is going to do something about your future and bring it into your present or cause you to move into it in the future, then really you're stuck in just hope. And yet faith is something that's supposed to give substance to what we hope for. And so this word substance is actually a better translation because the Greek word there is Hoopoe Stasis. Now, in its most basic definition, Hoopoe Stasis from the Greek means something that stands behind or underneath, like a foundation, something that you hope for, something that stands behind something else. But in Greco-Roman philosophy, or particularly Greek philosophy, the Hoopoe Stasis spoke of the consciousness or the soul of the world. Plato referred to it as the anima mundi. It was believed that there was an invisible energy field, an invisible conscious field, a soul, if you will, that existed within and behind everything that we see in the material world. It was, in a sense, the matrix of creation, or the divine womb out of which everything that was physical and material originated from. It's going back to the source and the origin that can't be seen, that is a tangible substance and a real conscious reality that is modulating or controlling or manifesting what we see in the physical dimension. If you want to get a good modern understanding of this, I would highly recommend that you read Greg Braden's book, The Divine Matrix. Greg does an excellent job of taking modern scientific experiments and breakthroughs in quantum physics and combining it with spiritual truths and showing us this reality of the animus mundi, or the divine matrix, in a way that we as modern people can understand it. But suffice it to say that this substance, this Hoopoe Stasis, was believed to be an actual substance that was the womb or the matrix of creation. It was the source of origin out of which everything in the physical and material world came from. Now, we can see that this is what the writer of Hebrews is referring to if we go down 2 verses from Hebrews 11:1, where we read, "By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of that which was visible." So in other words, what it's saying there is that the substance of creation is invisible material, it's invisible substance, and that God used that invisible substance, the matrix of creation, if you will, to bring into manifestation everything that we see in this three-dimensional world of physical matter, time, and space. Now, what's interesting is that the word worlds there in Hebrews 11:3 can refer to the physical material world. And this fits perfectly with Hebraic thought, because in Genesis chapter 1, God said, and it was. Everything that came into existence by the word of God. But the word there can also be translated as ages. And when we put it in the larger context of Hebrews chapter 11, we see that God begins to speak of people who by faith shaped the age in which they live. So we are invited in this passage to participate in the matrix of creation, not to just become intellectually persuaded or to have confidence that something that we're hoping for is going to happen, but to actually enter into the matrix of creation, to become co-creators, to give shape and form to our future according to our hopes. Now, hope is something that's always positive. Hope is something that's always in the future. So the first step to this is to be able to connect to a future reality. But if you don't do anything in your present moment to work with the substance of that thing, to give it shape and form and bring it into your present reality, then there is a complete disconnect between the future and the present. There's no bridge, if you will. And so therefore, your hopes often become hinged upon whatever causes and effects are happening around you that you are not participating in. And it becomes kind of like a carrot on a stick, always chasing it, hoping that you'll always get to it, but never being quite able to get there. You can think of the dog races where they put the treats at the end of in front of the dogs to make them run after the treat, but it stays just enough ahead of the dog that the dog never actually catches it. They just run after it. And that's how many of us live our lives. And so we're confused about how things happen and why things happen. We're confused about the will of God. Maybe it wasn't the will of God. Maybe it was better that I didn't have it, and all that stuff. Instead of realizing that as the sons and daughters of God, as the Bible tells us that we are, those made in the image of God, that we are called to become co-creators and participants in the divine substance, in the divine matrix, in the Hoopoe Stasis, in order to form and fashion the future that we desire to have. Now, how does this happen? Our entrance into the matrix of creation, into the Hoopoe Stasis, is really through our heart. Any passage that you look at where Jesus taught about faith, he normally mentioned the heart. The classic example of this is in Mark 11, 22, 23, and 24, where Jesus says, have faith. And then he says, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things which he says will happen for him, he will have whatever he says. I want you to notice in there, nowhere did Jesus say that God was going to move the mountain for you. Nowhere in there did he say that God was going to do anything for you. He said that if you in your heart believe that what you say will happen for you, you will give shape and form to the thing that you want. The thing that you say will be what will happen for you. So in other words, the mountain obeys you, the mountain does not obey God. And this is the biggest disconnect that we as believers or Christians or those even in the Western world have about the way things work. We have to begin to realize that we have to go, that we have been invited to go into the Hoopoe Stasis, to go into the matrix of creation with our hopes and with our dreams. And by our thoughts and our feelings from our heart, particularly our feelings, think about it this way: the mind thinks, the heart feels. And so when we generate the feeling of the thing that we want, we begin to work with that invisible substance. You can think about it this way. This invisible substance has no shape or form. Right now, in the present moment, your future is completely open-ended. It's not fixed or set by God. It's not happened yet. There is an infinite amount of possibilities and potentials for you and I to happen in our lives. And let's be honest, we all want to shape and give form to good things in our lives. And we can begin to work at an invisible level, at the level of cause, that is beyond doing anything in this natural world in order to manifest the thing that we're hoping for. Today, it's called the law of attraction. So how does this work? Well, our entrance into it, as I said, is through our minds and through our feelings and through our hearts. This means that our thoughts, our feelings, our imaginations communicate with this field of energy. And not only communicates with this field of energy, but actually takes the substance out of which our future will be, and begins to mold and shape it to what we want it to be. We become the creators, we become the formers and the fashioners of our lives when we participate in faith. So we have to have the intention to have the thing that we want. It starts with intention. When I think about what I hope for, I've got to be somewhat specific. If I just think, well, I want God to bless me, or I want good things to happen in my life, well, that's a good start, but what are the good things? What are the things that you want to have happen in your life? Maybe you want wealth. And so you put out your intention for the future that you want to have wealth. And let's say, just for example's sake, that you play the lottery and you win the lotto, you win a bunch of money, and you die the next day. You forgot to think about long life in order to enjoy that. Or you maybe don't die, but you get too sick to really enjoy it, so you're not thinking about health. And if you're thinking about health, maybe you're only thinking about your health and not the health of the people in your family or the person down the street who's struggling with sickness or disease, who has a child who's sick. So you can see then that this can become quite a complex matter. So the first thing we have to do is we have to have a well-formed outcome. We have to decide what it is that we actually want. Take your time with that. What is it that you're hoping for? What is it that you want to have and enjoy? How will you know when it shows up? What's it going to look like when it shows up? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to feel like? And as you're putting forth that mental effort, as you're putting forth that planning, you're actually beginning to already give shape to the thing that you want. Because you have to have the thought behind it. You have to have the intention behind it. And you have to have eventually the feeling of it. So we can do this by becoming specific about the thing that we want. Let's use the example of money. Let's say that you want a specific, be specific, be specific about the kind of job you want. Be specific about how you want the money to come into you. Try to give as much specifics to it as you can, but it gets a little tricky because you don't want to make it so specific that it's really difficult for it to show up in your life. Let's use relationships, for example. Sometimes with relationships, we become attached to a specific person. And so we love the qualities of that person, and we set our minds on that person, and we want that person specifically to come into our lives. That's probably an example of being too specific. You could break that down by looking at the qualities that you admire in that person. They're attractive physically, they have a good sense of humor, their personality makes you feel good. You can begin to use those as components for the relationship that you want to create for your future by saying, the person that I want to have a relationship with in the future, I want them to have these qualities. You're being specific enough that you can attract a person with those qualities into your life, but you're not being so specific that you narrow it down to one outcome, which makes it that much more complicated. And in this example, is probably overriding that person's free will to begin with. And remember, whatever you have to do to get someone in your life, you have to keep doing in order to keep them. That sounds like a lot of work. So anyway, I think you get the idea. So then you begin to move past whatever's going on in your present circumstances, and you begin to, in the theater of your imagination, create the thing that you want. Now, imagination is very important because it'll help you access the reality of it and the feeling of it so that you bring it in your mind's eye, you make it present to yourself in this present moment. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Hope is in the future. Faith is in the now. But faith does not exist in the realm of what is seen. Faith exists in the realm of what is not seen yet. Or you could say, not seen to other people, but seen by us in our mind's eye. So we fix our mind's eye on the very thing that we desire to have. We focus upon it. We send our intention with it. We send our thoughts with it until eventually we get the feeling. What's it going to feel like when you have abundance? What's it going to feel like when you're healthy? What's it going to feel like? What are the emotions and the feelings that you're going to have when this thing actually does show up in your life? And try as best you can to generate those feelings. See, faith is an exercise. It's not an ongoing thing of trying to be fully persuaded that something is going to happen. It's a meditative exercise where you set aside time in your life to go in the theater of your imagination into the future, put yourself there, and create it with as much detail as possible of the very thing that you are hoping to have so that it becomes real inside you. In your mind, you can see it. In your heart, you can feel it. In your mind, you can think about it. And then from that place, you can begin to give speech to it. You can begin to declare it. I declare that I have this thing in my life. I declare that this thing is real. I declare that this thing is showing up in my life. I begin to speak as though I have it. And then I can even take actions on the natural plane to begin to act as though I have it. So the person who wants the right job, maybe they decide exactly what it is, the kind of work culture and environment they want to work in. If they want opportunities for promotion, how much they want to make, doing something that they enjoy doing. They can create that in the field of their mind, in the field of their imagination. And let's say they're unemployed, they can begin to act on it by maybe setting their alarm to wake up at the time that they would wake up. Maybe getting themselves dressed in a particular dress code. Maybe it's business casual. Instead of hanging out in your pajamas all day, filling out job applications, you begin to dress according to the job that you want. This adds extra energy and momentum to what you're doing. And then, of course, you have to do the natural things as well. You can't just expect the job to fall in your lap, although it might. But even if it does, you still have to go to the job interview. You still have to fill out the application. You still have to do the things on the natural level that support you in the things that you're asking for. So I want to encourage you to think about some of the things that I shared. But most importantly, I want you to move from being the effect, thinking that God is going to do something for you, and participate in the realm of cause by realizing that faith is the invisible substance, the matrix of creation, the womb out of which our hopes and our futures and our dreams come. And that it is our responsibility through the stuff of our mind, our emotion, our intention, and our feeling to begin to give shape and form so that we co-create that future, so that we work with the divine energy to shape it and form it so that it will show up in our life. I believe if you do this, that you absolutely will see results. In fact, I know that you will. I hope this video has been a blessing to you. If it has, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel if you're not. And if you are, maybe think about sharing it with some other people that you think will be a blessing to. And until next time, God bless you. Shalom, namaste. The divine in me recognizes the divine in you, and I honor it.